Now, a suicide attack on a government compound in southern Afghanistan has left at least 19 dead and over 35 injured. Well, it follows a string of attacks and the killing of President Karzai's half-brother and comes as the US withdraws its forces. Let's discuss this in more detail now with Michael Scheuer, a former CIA intelligence officer and a historian in Washington, D.C. Many thanks for being with us here on RT. Now, we've seen a string of deadly attacks in Afghanistan as the US moves troops out of the country. Are local forces there really going to be able to take over security?
No, we're watching a charade unfold here in Afghanistan. The Afghan army, the Afghan National Police Force are never going to be able to control the country, not just because they haven't been trained sufficiently, but also because they're divided tribally. When we're gone, when NATO leaves, they'll go back to their tribes and they'll fight each other again. So the whole house of cards will come down after the United States and its allies complete their withdrawal, a withdrawal in defeat, really.
You talk about it being a house of cards there, and even though America's number one enemy, if you like, Osama bin Laden, is now dead, who's the next target?
Well, I think they're going after Mullah Omar, the head of the Taliban. They're going after Ayman al-Zawahiri. But just saying those things makes you realize, I think, that we're still approaching this as a law enforcement issue, a cops and robbers issue. I began a program back in 1995 where we were trying to capture or kill these people one at a time. So we've been after this. We've pursued this law and order approach now for 16 years. And there are many, many more Islamists in the field today with guns fighting us than there were in 1995. So ultimately, what we have after 10 years of effort in Afghanistan is a body count. That's all. We don't have any measure of progress against the enemy.
And why do you think that the security situation in the region is still so tense, despite the fact, as we were saying earlier, that Osama bin Laden has now been caught? It just doesn't seem to be improving in the region. Why?
Well, bin Laden, the Taliban had grown to the point in Afghanistan where it could lead the insurgency by itself. It really didn't need al-Qaeda's fighters. Al-Qaeda's role in the insurgency there is primarily right now logistics and maybe a little training. And that continues even with bin Laden's death. But the kind of hard story, the hard fact is that we went there with one mission, which was to destroy the Taliban and to destroy al-Qaeda. And quite frankly, we haven't killed enough of the enemy and their supporters to make any difference. We instead tried to build a Western democracy in a country that's conservatively Islamic and deeply Islamic. And so we failed to do that. And the situation is going to remain violent and probably detrimental, certainly very detrimental to Pakistan, as long as we stay there, as long as the alliance stays in Afghanistan.
Well, turning to very recent events now in Norway, first thoughts were that it would be the work of an Islamic terrorist, what we saw unfolding in Oslo, but obviously results showed it to be very different. What do you think that tells us? Who do you think who turned out to be the enemy in that situation?
Well, I don't know if it's so important who he was himself. He was a killer who killed an extraordinary number of people. But I think what it does say is what British Prime Minister Cameron and Chancellor Merkel of Germany said, that multiculturalism has failed in Western Europe and in the United States and in Canada and elsewhere. And there are large numbers of people who are not going to pick up guns and shoot anyone. But there's a large number of people in the West who believe that the multiculturalists, the people who are forcing changes in Western culture, in Western religion, in Western civilization, are really the enemy. And that's certainly what the man in Norway felt, and I don't think he's alone. Again, he's probably in a very small minority who will pick up a gun and do something, but the governments who have allowed endless amounts of open immigration, who have made free speech much less viable in the West, they're at base the cause of what happened in Norway. It was an overreaction to a failed policy, at least according to people like Cameron and Merkel.
Turning now to Libya, over 30 countries recognise the rebel council as Libya's legitimate government now, but who are they exactly?
They're jihadists. The West is helping to put into power an Islamist government that will have as its strong right arm people who have fought the United States and its allies and formerly the Red Army in Afghanistan and Iraq. And it is as brain dead a policy, an intervention in the Muslim world as we've seen. We talk a lot about freedom and democracy, but what comes next in Libya is some kind of an Islamist government. And what the Muslim world is seeing, of course, is NATO again bombing a Muslim country that has oil. And so there's nothing but loss here for the West and encouragement to the jihadis around the world.
All right, Michael Scheuer, a former CIA intelligence officer and historian in Washington, D.C., many thanks for speaking to us here on RT.